there, gang. This is a special one. I'm really happy to get a look at this. We've delved into the history of Canadian guitar making a little bit over the years, and this is a piece of it. This is a guitar made by Oskar Graf. Where do we put Oskar in the pantheon of Canadian makers? I should take a step back and try to contextualize. For some reason, during the late 60s, early 70s, Canada organically became a hub of hand-built, luthier-made acoustic guitars. We're talking individuals making the guitar from start to finish, as opposed to batch construction or small shop manufacturing. You know, there's the hippie ethos of the time, and there's also a focus on traditional craftsmanship, like taking the mindset of a Spanish classical builder or something from the violin world and transplanting that to steel string guitars. During that era in the US, we see the emergence of hand-built electrics, certainly, and some acoustics, guys like Stuart Mossman and Michael Gurian. But if you dropped into Toronto in the mid-70s, you'd probably find more high-level guitar makers per capita than anywhere else in the world. Grit Laskin, Sergey de Jong, Linda Manzer, David Wren, Tony Duggan Smith, Jean Larrivee. That's a lot of talent in one place. At a time when it was sort of a medium-sized city, it's hard to imagine them all thriving and or competing when the boutique handmade guitar was only just becoming a thing. Oskar Graf is part of that scene and predates it a little bit. He's German, and in some sense the Canadian lutherie boom has strong roots in Germany, because the other German at that time was Edgar Munch, who is the direct line between old world guitar making disciplines and those Toronto builders. Munch was a classical builder who emigrated in the mid-60s. He taught Jean Larrivee. Jean Larrivee teaches everyone else. Oskar Graf shows up at around the same time in the late 60s. He's gone through the German furniture design program, which is, as you can imagine, rigorous in its European expectation of quality. And you can see that in the instruments he builds. But, you know, rather than making furniture here, he decides to settle out in the country rather than the city. Bucolic little situation in eastern Ontario. And he makes guitars. Again, it's hard to imagine what kind of determination you'd need to make that work during that time period. Because marketing then involved maybe getting a sympathetic journalist from the local paper to write a column about you. Somehow he managed to make it work. He didn't have a huge output. I think it was somewhere around 400 guitars over the course of his career. Like a classical builder, he's focused on every part of the process, so that means maybe a dozen guitars a year. And he had some high-level players pick up on what he was doing, and it was word of mouth. The business came to him, which is really the dream. He theoretically retired in 2014, but I think that basically amounted to going to part-time hours for him. The owner of this guitar convinced him to build something about 6 years ago, and this is what he came up with. There is a buzz. Or rather, there was. I heard it loud and clear yesterday morning. Tried it with the owner, and we both managed to make it buzz. Really loud. Oh, there it is. It's back. Good. Today it was gone, and it's since returned. It's intermittent. I think that's because I twisted the end pin jack with my hand a little bit. Got a rattly, slightly metallic buzz. See if I can make it go away again. No, it made it worse. That's a good thing. It's got an LR Baggs sound hole pickup installed, and I think the end pin jack is a little loose, and that might be what's causing it. The metallic component could be the washer inside vibrating against the inside of the end block. One thing I immediately noticed was just how deep the jack seems to be recessed into the end pin here. Ordinarily, I like to see the end of the jack kind of come even with or even slightly protrude beyond the cover. This one, I imagine, being this deep, probably won't even get a full... Yeah, I can't see how you're making contact with the tip of the jack, so that's where we're going to start. Yeah, that jack is just spinning around freely in there. The size of the sound hole pickup is going to prevent me from getting my arm in there, so I think I'm going to have to take things apart. There are a lot of subtleties. Notice anything about the bridge pins? They're positioned in a bit of an arc. It starts off straight and then kicks forward for the B and the E strings. In the standard Martin design, the takeoff points for those first two strings are farther forward due to the slant of the saddle. And in a lot of repairs, you see me making extended string grooves there to increase the break angle when the saddle gets too low and increase the pressure. He's thinking about function, and I really appreciate that. The whole guitar, it's very nicely made, but it's not precious. You know what I mean? It's designed to be played, not put in a display case. 6 years along, it's got pick scratches, dings, scuffs on the back. When you start with something that's built with care and vision, that stuff does not matter. Surface wear absolutely does not detract from the essential quality of this guitar. You could strum all the lacquer off it, and you're still going to pick it up and say, wow, someone knew what they were doing. Here's a quick look at some of the novel features in the bracing. The forward finger braces are actually one brace, in this case, that continues through the X and loops around and through the bridge plate. Also, the rear cutoff bar is floating. It's not connected with the X, and it's an airfoil shape rather than scalloped. Okay, I strung this up with no pickup in it at all. We've taken it right out of the equation. Let's see what it does. This is an open G. It was the second string played open that was giving us the major issue. So that was a G. See what it does. Pure as the driven snow. Experience tells me that there's not enough thread exposed here. So it goes back in. And I loosen the nut a turn or two and then try again. Well, friends, I was looking everywhere I would normally put the nut that would go on this, and I realized, wait a second, it didn't have a nut. The cover plate itself is threaded, of course, but that does not provide enough pressure to keep this thing in place. It needs one of these guys. Now, I happen to have another one for just such an occasion. That's funny. These jacks are usually produced with a hole through the barrel, through which you can slip something slender and stiff, and use that to hold it in place while you carefully tighten the nut. Snug, but not too snug. That's not going anywhere. And now if we put the strap button on there, the barrel should come just about flush with the end of the button. Now when we insert a patch cord, you get that good solid engaged sound. Here's a recent national. It's from 2020, a year in which only 332 guitars came off the presses there. Interesting finish. This is the Raw series in brass, which is basically designed to develop lots of character really fast. They leave it uncoated so your sweat and tears and other fluids can do their magic. So into this fairly new guitar, we're going to put what looks like a very vintage sort of Barkus Berry pickup. The plastic is all yellowing. Typography looks like mid-80s to me. And well, the instruction sheet seems to come from a time before TrueType fonts. Before disassembling everything on the guitar, I should probably plug this in and see what happens, just to make sure. Anyone home? Hello, Mr. Barkus. I'm here to offer you a fantastic saving on a new high-efficiency water heater. People ask what the proper setup is, or the action height on these guitars, and I've seen them from the factory anywhere between 6/64ths and about 8/64ths. In this case, the height of the biscuit is very close to the underside of the cover plate here. So much that it's hard to move the strings when you're taking them off. You want to be careful with these screws because the metal they're going into isn't particularly thick, and there's only like a thread and a half in there. So if you strip these out, you're in real trouble. I'll pull off the cover plate and be very careful with the cone. They're extremely fragile things. Looks like it was assembled by J.H., maybe? Be more legible if you're doing things for posterity, guys. I'm marking the center point of the fretboard, and we'll use that to position the pickup. A couple of pieces of tape keep it centered. I need to drill a hole through the metal body for the jack, so I'll mark its position and then use a step bit to cut through. It ends up being just a little bit undersized, so I can ream it the last little bit of a way for a good fit. That's fun. And we'll test it again. Perfect fit. I'll wire up the jack, and then we'll get back to the Graf. Well, a frustration. These LR bags pickups I think are really designed to go into something like a dreadnought-sized sound hole, which is 3 7/8 or 4 inches in diameter. And here we have something that is 3 9/16. Quite a bit smaller. There's really no way. These are held in place with a couple of screw tightening clamps here, and the distance from the outside of the screws is only about 3.5 inches, so there's like a 1/16 of an inch clearance. And, usually you open these up to their greatest extent, and by angling them in there, there's just enough clearance, and you can shift it back and forth, but not in this case. So we have to find an alternate way of getting this in there. So I'm going to try some double-sided tape on the clamp face and stick it to the underside of the soundboard here, and hopefully we can maneuver it. I want to just see the threads. Will it stay? Maybe. Oh, it's going to be tenuous. The other thing is there's quite a lot of loose cable in these, in anything less than a jumbo-sized guitar. So I've put a little curly Q knot in here to take up some of that excess space. I might even go back. Yeah, I think I'll do that. I'm going to use a cable tie to sort of truss this up a little bit. There we go. Let's also get a shot of this rosette here. Man, is it ever a snug fit. How do you get this in here? Oh, that's what's happened. I think the sound hole has gone slightly oval over time, which isn't uncommon actually, especially in the winter. Oh. Yeah. I'll try and reposition it in a place that's narrower than the best access point, put it that way. Stay. Okay. Now, if I'm lucky, I can sight. Oh man. Problem is the inside of the sound hole is chamfered slightly. It's radiused, so there's not a whole lot of space to adhere it. Okay, get in there. No, not like that. The other way to do this, of course, is to cut away some of the offending material. No, we're not going to do that. Before I took the strings off, I measured the relief at around 13 thousandths. I'm just snugging up the rod a little bit here. I'll also use one of these peel and stick retaining clips to try and capture that wire and make sure it's not got any opportunity to bounce around in there, causing unwanted sounds. With the truss rod adjustment, the neck relief has come down to 8 thousandths, which I think is okay. And it's also brought the action down a little bit with it. We started off with 7/64ths on the bass side, 5 on the treble. Now it's 6 and 4, which is pretty good. This player is reaching the age where knuckle soreness is setting in, and he wants to make it as easy as possible. So we're going to see if we can go lower. But what the adjustment also revealed is that the nut height on a couple of strings is a little too low. I noted previously there was virtually no gap over the first fret. And that was okay with the higher action, but now we can't get away with it. You know, I hear a slight lisp on the first and third strings. The nut is fine. I'm going to shim it with mahogany veneer. People ask why not use bone? Practicality. And in this case, the nut slot is actually slightly deeper than the fingerboard, so it's going to blend in fine. Just for interest, let's measure the clearance over the first fret. On the bass side here, we're sitting around 18 thousandths, which is pretty low. Usually I set them up at 21 thousandths. And I know these seem like ridiculously small increments to most people, but they make a difference. And on the treble side, the high string, it looks like 7 or 8 thousandths, which is really low. I'd usually expect to see about 15. So, yeah, we're going to need a shim, probably 7 or 8 thousandths thick. This kind of thing can happen to guitar makers and repairers when they get into that sort of race car mentality where you're trying to fine-tune things to the optimum razor's edge, where there's, basically no allowance for wear. It's like Formula One versus a high-performance street car. There was a comment in the last video that was interesting to me. One Daniel Santernino said, "How many viewers think that we would love to do this work, but would regret it fast?" And it's the secret, because liking guitars is a very small part of all this, and not applicable at all to the trade. Really, it's more about being as good or better than you were yesterday, and trying to learn while you're doing it. I constantly get emails from people saying, "Hey, I'm just getting into the field. You're an inspiration. I love guitars. Yay!" And then, a year, 14 months later, the next email comes and it's, "Man, I'm burning out." It's like, "Oh, great. You've arrived. This is the rest of your life." You have to somehow overcome that frustration. Adam Savage's wife watches him watching me and says, "Oh, it's the cranky luthier guy again." And it's true. You can't be starry-eyed when you're doing this because it's a fight. And if you win, you get your $100 and the chance to fight again tomorrow. So, in my experience, the average career in guitar repair is probably about 2 years. I'll scrape off the excess veneer and sand everything up to a nice fine polish. More traces and subtleties. You can see this trailing edge here of the nut slot is dark. It's a line of veneer of some kind. It looks like ebony. Why would he do that? Don't know. I'll touch up the depths of the nut slots. Doesn't take much. And here I'm lowering the saddle height by sanding the saddle. Polishing, polishing, polishing. Back to the National. I'll install the new jack now. I've got the spiked washer on it to keep it good and secure. The pickup will be stuck on with double-sided tape, so I need to clean off the waxed surface. I'll use a couple of layers of tape to provide some cushion for the pickup. Get that locked in place. The wire will go in through the F-hole, and I'll reinforce it against those sharp corners on the inside with an extra piece of shrink tubing. The wire gets secured to the neck stick with a cable tie, and I'll connect the hot leads, protect the joint with some shrink tubing. Then I'll do the grounds, more shrink tubing, and then another cable tie. Let's finish off the Graf. I'll clean and oil the board and readjust the pole piece heights to account for the lower action, and we'll be all done.